Hello all my JavaScript friends, this is the Virtuoid, aka Mike Smith, and this is Fun with JavaScript, our racing game. Okay everyone, it's time to actually see some cars racing. Now again, this is a proof of concept. There is no final code here. This is not ready for production. This is basically to say, can we put together a track with some model cars and have them race gravity controlled down a track? And the answer is yes. Is it perfect? Of course not. But that's the whole key behind a proof of concept. I wouldn't be able to prove that I could do it. Once I know I can do it, then I can say, okay, so what I want to do next is I will develop a game over this. And we'll cover that with the very last video of this series. So this is the beginning of the car game here. And basically this allows us to be able to drag and drop different cars that we want to race within the 4 slots that are available for the track. So let's take a look at very quickly how that is done. Now, I'm not going to go through the details of this. I think I've already done that in the previous video. But the idea here is that I have a JavaScript file on this home page that gives me a, for lack of a better term, a database. And imagine you can get this database from another place. If you want to expand upon the game and have thousands of cars to choose from, you can get this database from another place. But this is good enough for what we're doing here. It just has a color, has a name, it has an ID, and it has the model. The model is what's going to be important. That's what I'm going to kind of concentrate on a little bit when we get into the race track itself. So the model, if it is blank, it uses the base car base model. And that basically means this is basically going to be the wheels, the transmission, and the big block body. That's it. If it has something else inside of it, it's going to then use that particular model. And so it will, if we go to the left-hand side here, it will sit here and say, okay, I want to use the Ferrari JavaScript, or in this case, the low polycar JavaScript. Otherwise, I want to use the car base JavaScript to be the model of the car. And so that's how we know that once we bring up this one, our green car is going to be, I think green car is going to be, let me get all of it in the screen here. Yeah, so green car is going to be the green ghost, which means we should have the base model for the green car. The red car is going to be our low poly car, so that should be our low polygon car, excuse me. The blue car is going to be the Ferrari, and the yellow car is going to be the yellow yak, which is a base car. So that's how all 4 of those look like. So let's take a look at the race. Once we click on race there, we go to the race page. And this is basically the JavaScript that we're going to use for the race page. There's not a whole lot here that's very different from what we have done. I do want to change one thing here though real quick, and I'll tell you why here in just a minute. The real important thing here is how do we load up all of those different cars? Well, if we take a look at our home.javascript file, actually, let's take a look at another one here. Okay, yeah, let's take a look at the car service. Basically, what happens here is that when we click on the race button, we're going to run a thing called Start Race. Now, remember, each of these 4 cars have been assigned into different slots. The slots number 1, 2, 3, and 4 up. I made a change, and I forgot I made a change, which I said I'll show you here in just a minute, so now it's reset. So let's put those 4 cars back in there. Sorry about that. So when I click on the race button, what will happen is it will go to the start race routine, and the start race routine will go through each one of the slots. Now what's important here is that we're going to create an array of car slots, and we're going to push in into this array here, we're going to push the slot index, which will be 0 through 3 in this case, and the car itself. And we're going to do what we call a toObject to the car. And this is something that within the car we have a routine called toObject, which simplifies the car itself. And the reason we're doing that is that we're going to be doing a JSON stringify on this particular slots and store that into session storage. So what that means is that as we run this particular session here, we have those 4 cars are going to be within that session storage. And so when we go to another page, which is what this real simple little program does, the race.html, it will then read into the session storage and say, oh, here are the 4 cars in the 4 slots. And I have the index and then which car is going to be in that index. So let's go over to race. So now we've clicked on the race button, which we haven't done yet. And I said earlier, I changed this to false, and I'll tell you why here in just a minute. The key here is that here's where I get the slots from the session storage. And so when I flip through all of this, I am going to load in all of these different bases. Now, You're probably asking now, I've got an await import here to do a dynamic import of a particular model. And if you reviewed the cars video that we did a couple of videos ago, you'll remember there that I also did a await import here within a synchronous function. But notice I don't have any synchronous function. And the reason for that is that JavaScript allows you to do base module awaits, or if you're at the core, if you're not within a function, if you're at the core of your JavaScript file or at the base of your JavaScript file, you're still able to do an await without having to do an async. And I'm at the core of the JavaScript file here. I'm not within a function. So I'm able to do, and I'm within a for loop here. That's the reason I didn't do, slots.for each, because that puts it within a function and I had to make that an async function. So I did just a simple little for loop to be able to do the await here. And again, like I've said in that previous video, I really don't like doing awaits. Once I get to refactoring all of this, when we do the grand game, which I'll explain in our next video, I go and get rid of all these awaits and make everything as asynchronous as possible, everything as event-driven as possible. That's really the best way of being able to program it. You shouldn't have to sit there and force the computer to do certain things and certain tasks, in this particular case. By having everything as asynchronous, we're able to get a lot of freedom in what we can do with the program. But that, again, that's for all the refactoring that would have to be done here. So the idea here is that we're looping through all the different slots and that we're doing a dynamic loading in of all the different cars. If the car home, if the car model is blank, which you see there, oops, wrong one. There you go. Car model is blank, then we're going to basically say, hey, it's going to be just a simple JavaScript file. But if the model name is not blank, which it's not blank for the red car and the blue car, then we're going to do a dynamic loading in of, or the importing of that car, and set the car factory to that particular car, and then a load in that car. And again, if you take a look at, and in fact, I would encourage to review the cars video, and I'll have a link to it here. Review that video and you'll find out why I'm using a car factory here. Very basically, I'm using a car factory so that slots, or when I generate all this, the race doesn't know what car. It's just saying, hey, I need a car, give me a car. And it's somebody else's responsibility to say, well, here's a Ferrari, here's a low poly car, here's your base car. And that's what this car factory is all about. So by assigning a car factory to the slots, I now know that when I want to create a car, this is the kind of car I want to create. And all that is done right here. So again, now I can do a for each loop because I'm not asynchronizing everything. So I'm now creating a new car factory, and I'm getting that car factory from up here. So I'm either going to create the base, I'm going to create a Ferrari, or I'm going to create the low poly car. So once I have all of that ready to go, I now have cars in my car mapping. I now have my 4 different cars. And I'm just setting the starting ID to, if the slot happens to be 1, I'm setting the starting ID. No big deal there. All right, real easy here from this particular point on. We're loading up we're initializing our test track, and our test track is defined way at the very top here. In this case, we're doing our test track live -X. That's our test track. So we are initializing the test track there. We're starting the display. This does the actual display of the test track. We're getting our selected track, and the reason we're doing that is because when we get the selected track, this allows us to be able to get access to the drop cars, adjust cars, basically these routines here. The drop cars, the adjust cars, the cross finish line, and the start race. And again, I need the start race to be able to actually drop the starting gate. I need the drop cars to drop the cars onto the track, which I'll explain a little bit more detail this time. And I need the cross finish line routine to be able, within the rendering routine, to figure out when the cars have actually crossed the finished line. So all of that says done. We drop the cars. Let's go and physically drop the cars onto the routine. And this is what happens. So let's now go into the add starting gate and look at that drop car routine. It's very, very simple. I kind of briefly explained it earlier in the earlier video, but basically what we want to do here is that we got the cars. We're going to first junk the cars, because if we want to be able to have some sort of restart in the race, I want to be able to clear out all of the different meshes that were associated with the cars. So I junk out the cars. And then what I do is I then position the car based upon what slot number it's going to be in, because the car is either going to be in slot 0 and 1, which will be in front, but they're going to be left and right hand side of the center part of the track. Then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone the position based upon whether the cars are in slot 0 and 1, which is the lower gate, or 2 and 3, which is on the upper gate. And then I just set the positions of the cars, and then the most important thing is I set the position of the Y, because remember, we're on a slope here. So the idea here is that we want to be able to put the car just above the slope so that when it drops into place, it's ready to go. Now, if I really wanted to be really cute about this, I should be able to rotate the car and have it just barely above the track where it just barely drops onto the track. And you'll see that here in just a minute. It just kind of drops and then bounces into position. You'll see that here in just a second. That's again for something in the future, but that's kind of basically what will happen with the drop cars, is that this whole routine here, which is inside the starting gate, allows me to be able to drop the cars into the starting gate. So that's all that drop cars does. Adjust cars is you have to make any kind of rotational adjustments to the cars. That actually was an old routine that I really don't need anymore. Here's the really cool thing, the car mesh check. This is where I get the telemetry meshes of the different cars. Now, what is the telemetry mesh? Now, telemetry mesh is basically a particular mesh that is, let's see if I can find it here in the Ferrari. Yeah, here it is. This is a particular mesh on the car that I want to use to be able to signify when the car has crossed the finish line. So basically, I could technically check all of the different meshes of the cars, and that probably might be the better idea, is something as simple as this race. But in this particular case, again, for the POC, I just want to test a particular mesh. So what will happen here is that I will now get an array of meshes from the telemetry meshes from each of the different cars. In this case, mesh number 9 on the Ferrari. And I'm going to get all of that into a particular map called the car mesh check. And what that will be used for is if we flip over to our finish gate, our finish gate has a crossed finish line, and this crossed finish line is going to be within the rendering loop. FWJS has a rendering loop that it's about 60 frames a second or so. It will basically call routines to be able to say, okay, what do you want me to do while everything is running within the render? And I'm going to sit there and say, oh, I want you to check to make sure a car is past the finish line or not. And so what I've done here is I created a routine called cross finish line, which I pass to it the car meshes. And so when I do my intersecting ray, and this is a particular ray that says, draw an imaginary line from one point to another and tell me what meshes it is intersected with. And I'm passing it with these car meshes. And that basically says, okay, as you draw this line here, tell me if you collide with any one of these meshes. And if you do, put that into an array. So what will be the result of cross finish line? It will be either an empty array, which means nothing's happened, or it will be multiple cars in the array. And hopefully it won't ever be a tie, but you never know. 60 frames a second is relatively slow in computer terms, so it could always, we could always get ties. And if that's the case, well, that's just the way it goes. But anyway, so that's what this car mesh part here is I've now got an array that allows me to be able to say, hey, dudes, this is the meshes I want you to check for when you want to cross the finish line. I got an arc rotate and universal. I'm running actually universal camera, and this basically allows me to be able to move the camera as if I'm a first person, for this particular case here. Order of finish and race timing. These are things that are within the actual HTML of the racetrack to be able to get the order of finish on the left-hand side here. Here is my render loop back. As you can tell here, this is where I do my cross finish line, and this is where I figure out which cars have crossed the finish line, and I add to my order of finish what the timing is. And then I start the render. Once I start the render, that's when the cars physically drop on the thing. Okay, so this actually runs the cars themselves. Now, earlier I had set the run cars to false here, and the reason I did that is so that they will drop the cars but not actually run the race, so we can kind of see what everything is happening. So if the cars were actually running, what will happen here is that we will create a new set of lights. These are the lights at the very beginning. And then we will start the lights. That will start the lights blinking with red, 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 red. As soon as it hits green, it finishes up the promise. So at that point, then we do the race timing. That starts the timer that we have, the little timing service. Then we actually start the race. And when we start the race, what happens is that the blocks drop down and they go off. And then there's a little thing inside the start race. Let me go to the start race here. This is back on the add starting gate. And I talked about this in the earlier videos. Start race, basically, once it drops the gates, it will wait for 3 seconds. And the reason I'm waiting for 3 seconds there is just for funsies. I then turn the lights off, and that makes the lights disappear at the top. So all we have at the very top there is the timer and then the order of the finish. And that is pretty much it. So what happens when I hit the race is this. Now, as you can see there, what happened was that there's obviously a little delay as it loaded everything in, drew the track out and everything. So here's our track. It's a very, very simple track, just a simple little down slope there. Here are the 4 cars. Now, if you notice, what happened was that when they dropped, they were actually a little bit above the track, so they kind of dropped and then they had to kind of slide into place. Let me hit refresh and show you that one more time here. So as you can tell, they drop and then slide into place. Now, eventually, I would want to probably rotate the cars to match the slope of the track so that when they get placed on the track, they don't have far to drop. And the reason they're having to drop is that if there's any part of these wheels that happens to be rendering within the track itself, collisions galore start at that particular point in time, and the cars, Lord knows what happens to cars, they go flying all over the place. So so to make my life easier, I just kind of have it just a little bit above the track so that they drop into place. And notice nothing is happening here. That's because I have the race is equal to false. So nothing is happening. So let's refresh again. And again, it brought it in from the session storage. So I know that card number 0 is my green base, as is card number 3. Low poly car there. I'm on universal camera now, not arc rotate. Low poly car is number 1, and the Ferrari is my blue number 2. Number 2? The 0, 1, 2. Yeah, number 2 there. So those are the 3 different cars. So let's run a race and see what happens. So to run a race, let's go back to race.javascript. Let's go to our run cars false, and let's change that to true. Let's save it. Let's go and see what happens. Da, 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 da. Notice the timer is now going down. As soon as it hits green, the things will drop and they are off. Let's see what happens. Oh, yellow blocked off the Ferrari, but it looks like green and red are going in it. Green wins! And notice that the order of finish came out correct. Will the Ferrari get past the yellow car? Yeah, it looks like he will. That's great. And third place is the Ferrari. So notice what happened here is that as the cars pass that little green line, and the green line there isn't the actual ray, but it highlights what that ray intersection is. I passed it all for the telemetry meshes from the particular cars and say, hey, Ray, if you hit one of these meshes, tell me about it. As soon as it did, it told me. Green Ghost finished in 13:27, and 0.3 of a second later, Red Ranger was able to get past there. So that worked great. Ferrari was third. Let's refresh. Let's try again. Let's see what happens now. And it's random enough where things could, different things could happen. Let's race. Let's go all the way down to the bottom here. And flip around, see if we can see them coming in. There they are. It's like red and green. Oh, the Ferrari wrecked. Boom! Oh, very close race this time. Green and red. Notice there is we had a bad wreck there at the very end. Notice there is a problem that we have here. Let me refresh again, and I'll stay at the very top there to kind of emphasize what that problem is. One of the issues we have here, green and red are going to win most of the time because all the masses of the cars, all the friction of the car's wheels, everything is pretty much exactly the same. So it has the basic, there are some, like as you can tell, the red kind of wrecked that time. Heck, blue bull came flying in at the very second there. So as you can tell there, all the cars are pretty much exactly the same. So a lot of the time, the green car and the red car, whoever's in slot number 0 and slot number 1, are going to win most of the time. So one of the things that we're going to need to do with this is to basically figure out a way that the cars will behave differently based upon different parameters, either by weight, by friction, by tire type. I don't know. That's some of the things that we'll have to kind of work on. But luckily, we have this particular test track here to kind of help us figure out, how to get the collider meshes done correctly. Oh, that time they both wiped out. but how to get the collider meshes done correctly, and how to get the cars not to wreck as much, and try to keep the cars on the track as much as possible. Let's just go down here to the finish line and see how it works. And here they come. Oh, Ferrari hit the wall, as did Greenie. Vroom, and red has crossed. Anybody else? Nope, that's pretty much going to be it. So that's pretty much the POC. We've got the cars working the way we want them to work. Not perfect, but it works well. We got the finish line working. We know how to do the finish line. We know how to do the timing. We know how to do start. We know how to stop the cars before they're going off the track. We got a nice wall. We got a nice track. Starting gate works really good. That's basically the POC. That will finish this up. I've got one more video where I'm going to tell you what we're going to be doing in the future with all this, so that will be the next video. If you like this video, please click on the like button below, subscribe to this channel, or leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. We're trying to get to 1 million subscribers by February of 2042, so please hit that subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you very much again for watching. This is the Virtuoid, aka Mike Smith. We'll see you later.